Revenge with Karen. I knew something was wrong the second I saw the Outlook invite. No subject, no context. Just a 9:30 a.m. one-on-one with Brad. Middle of the week, right after the pipeline meeting. I clicked accept without blinking, but my stomach dropped like an elevator with the cables cut. I'd seen this movie before, and spoiler alert, it didn't end with a promotion. Brad didn't even look up when I walked into his office, was poking at a banana with a plastic knife like it owed him money. Hey, he said without smiling. That drawn-out fake enthusiasm, the kind of tone people use when they're about to ask if you've considered taking a step back to reevaluate your strengths. I sat down. No handshake. No preamble. He flipped his laptop around, showed me a half-finished org chart like it was a birth announcement. Churn's moving under strategic ops, he said. We were talking about moving a file to a different folder. It's a closed-door decision. Then he smiled, no teeth, just corporate smug, and added, we think you'd be great focusing on special projects for a bit. Special projects. That's what they call exile with snacks. I kept my face neutral. Not out of pride, just muscle memory. You don't spend 7 years keeping revenue from bleeding out the bottom of the bucket without learning to control your own damn leakage. I nodded slowly, just once, then asked the only thing that mattered. What kind of projects? He blinked like I'd asked him to do math in his head. Oh, he said, waving his hand in a vague figure eight. Retention-adjacent stuff. Loyalty programs, internal tooling, not customer-facing but still valuable. Still valuable. Translation. We don't want you near the things that matter, but we're too cowardly to fire you. I stared at the screen behind him. My dashboard was open. My dashboard, the one I'd built in my 3rd year when I realized marketing didn't know how to read CSVs and sales couldn't tell a returning customer from a ghosted one. The tabs were wrong. The filters were off. He had no idea what he was even looking at. Who's taking Churn? I asked, already knowing. He grinned. We're giving Cam a shot. He's hungry. Brings a fresh perspective. Cam, the human LinkedIn post. Loud voice, no SQL. Once confused retention with NPS on a call with a client, and then blamed the slide deck. Cam, who thought dashboards were vibes and user segmentation, was kinda micromanagey. I nodded again. Same slow pace. Just enough to signal compliance while mentally rolling duct tape around the cracked foundation of my dignity. Brad must have mistaken that for gratitude, because he leaned back in his Herman Miller throne and said, I know change can be hard. This is an opportunity for you to reset. You've been in Churn for a long time. Maybe it's time to zoom out a little, zoom out. As if I hadn't spent years drilling into customer behavior so deeply I could smell cancellations before they clicked confirm. I'd built our retention models like spiderwebs, quiet, delicate, sticky as hell. Every signal mattered. Every cancellation had a breadcrumb trail. Now they were handing it all to a guy who once asked if a Churn cohort was like a customer birthday. I stood up. Appreciate the clarity, I said, because anything more honest would have left a crater in the drywall. He gave me one of those slow, managerial nods that made it seem like he thought he'd just mentored someone. I walked out without shaking his hand. My stomach was doing cartwheels, but my hands were steady. I went back to my desk, turned off Slack, opened a blank Google Doc, and typed the date and time at the top. Then I wrote 3 words they reassigned Churn. Underneath, I added, dashboard will be overwritten. Forecast model no longer protected. Ownership unclear. I wasn't surprised, just quietly gutted. I'd seen the writing on the wall for weeks. The double-booked meetings, the sideways compliments, the sudden urgency to rethink workflows. Brad had never understood what I did, just knew my slides made him look competent. But now there was a new VP in town, and Brad was eager to be seen as a team player. And team players don't defend the old guard. They throw them under the reorg bus with a smile. The worst part? I wasn't even angry. Not yet. Just tired. Tired in the way you get when you've built something delicate and true, only to watch someone swap it out for a shinier toy they don't know how to use. Tired like a lighthouse keeper watching drunk sailors rip out the bulbs because they want mood lighting. But even then, even with the humiliation still ringing in my ears, there was a flicker in my chest. Not rage, not despair, something quieter, sharper. I opened the dashboard, took a screenshot of the current model, then another, and another. The project they gave me was called Project Anchor, which sounded like something strategic until you opened the brief and realized it was a loyalty initiative built for an audience that didn't exist. Internal-only pilot, Brad had said, as if I were lucky to be trusted with it. We want to explore what retention could look like from within. What it looked like was a PowerPoint template with placeholder text and a half-finished Miro board, last touched in February. I was supposed to design a loyalty program for employees. Perks, gamification, swag. Not a single stakeholder had responded to the kickoff doc. The only replies I got were automated out-of-office messages from people who didn't know they were on the thread. So, I smiled. I sat quietly in a corner of Slack like a well-behaved ghost and pretended to map persona journeys for a rollout that everyone already knew would die in a subfolder. Meanwhile, Cam was rebranding my life's work with the gleeful cluelessness of a guy speedrunning his first Tableau tutorial. He renamed the Churn dashboard to Customer Pulse 2.0. He added a GIF of a heartbeat monitor in the corner for vibe. He posted in the #Growth Huddle channel with all the swagger of someone born with wireless earbuds and a trust fund. Excited to roll out a cleaner, simplified churn model. Gotta remove the noise if we want to scale rocket the noise he referred to. That was a decade of retention insight, encoded in behavioral microsegmentation. Gone. The next growth sync was the first time I heard Cam say the phrase "yo why churn dip" like it was a flex, while standing in front of a line graph that looked like someone had tripped while drawing it. Brad nodded along like a bobblehead. "Big improvement," he said. "Streamlined." I watched from the Zoom gallery like a guest at my own funeral. They couldn't hear the way my jaw locked, the way my nails left half-moons in my palm. But I was smiling. The kind of smile you give when someone's bragging about fixing a car they didn't realize was running fine until they poured sugar in the gas tank and called it weight reduction. They were proud of the numbers. Of course they were. Because Cam had quietly turned off attribution lag correction, part of the model that properly time-adjusted user behavior after cancellation, which meant his churn is down numbers were only true if you ignored the exits that hadn't been logged yet, like measuring fire damage before the smoke clears. The actual churn rate wasn't down. It was metastasizing, so I started documenting. Quietly. I opened a new folder in my personal Google Drive, called it Echoes. I saved the original model files, ones I'd backed up before Brad cut me loose. I downloaded exports of the last legitimate retention reports. I took screenshots of Slack threads, dates, timestamps, version histories, and then I sent my first breadcrumb. An email to myself, subject line, report misattribution week 32. Body, churn delta shows net retention up 3.4%, but exits from segments C6 and E2 not included. Attribution lag correction removed from query. Forecast invalid. Attached, the flawed dashboard export and a redlined version of the SQL query that proved Cam had no idea what he was doing. I didn't send it to legal. Not yet. Didn't flag it to Brad or the new VP. I just let it sit, dated, verifiable, mine. That week, I spent my anchor hours building a loyalty program no one asked for and rewriting emails to HR that I never sent. Meanwhile, Cam hosted a lunch and learn called Retention Reboot, building churn resilience through data intuition. Yes, data intuition. He'd found a way to weaponize buzzwords into armor, and they were eating it up. I kept smiling, because behind my terminal smile was a fire. Not loud, not burning the walls down. Just the steady crackle of someone who's already started the slow, invisible process of pulling bricks out from the foundation. One spreadsheet at a time, started with a number that didn't make sense. On a Tuesday morning, while pretending to storyboard an employee coffee reward system for Project Anchor, I checked the public-facing churn dashboard, Cam's masterpiece. The one he'd renamed Customer Pulse 2.0 and presented like it came engraved on gold. The number on the top line read churn. 5.6% down arrow with a little green arrow like it was a reason to break out champagne. That number was a lie. Not even a clever one, just stupid, lazy, confident. The kind of lie that hopes no one's paying attention. Because just last quarter, that same segment had logged an 8.2% churn before the fiscal forecast cuts. A 2.6% improvement in one quarter would be miraculous if it weren't mathematically impossible given the accounts I personally knew had canceled. So I opened up my old retention tracker, tucked away in my offline archives like an old diary I never wanted to revisit. I cross-referenced customer IDs from the last valid cohort report I ran before Cam and his data intuition took over. And there it was. 4 VIP clients gone. No follow-up notes, no exit interviews, no Slack threads, just a gap, like they'd never existed. Except I remembered every single one of them. Fintech startup from Seattle who emailed twice about concerns with billing transparency. The enterprise logistics firm that flagged our lack of multilingual support as a deal breaker. The pharma vendor who'd been asking for quarterly reviews that got lost in the shuffle. And the AI platform that, last I checked, had our dashboard embedded into their support center. Gone, quietly, without triggering so much as a customer success ping. In the new model, cancellations were listed under a generic tag, voluntary churn reason unspecified, which told me everything I needed to know. Cam didn't just remove attribution lag, he flattened the taxonomy, collapsed the nuanced churn reasons, product friction, feature misalignment, UX fatigue, into useless catch-alls that made the graphs prettier and the execs dumber. A dashboard built to warn had been turned into one that sedated. So I stopped trying to fix Anchor. I closed the loyalty doc, left the internal wiki tab open for show. Then I launched OBS Studio, the screen recorder I used during remote training sessions, and began my real work. Every Tuesday and Thursday, when Cam posted updated dashboards or ran internal demos, I recorded. When I noticed churn notes edited retroactively in Salesforce, I screen captured the audit trail. When a renewal forecast got mysteriously bumped from likely to confirmed, I pulled the diff log. I started saving versions of Cam's dashboards every Friday. Not the PDF exports, those could be cherry-picked. I downloaded the raw CSVs, timestamped and hashed them, saved to an encrypted drive under a folder named thread count. Every file, every inconsistency, every ignored alert. It was death by 1,000 mislabels. And the silence made it worse. Same leadership team that once panicked over a 0.4% churn uptick was now clapping along to numbers that were obviously massaged. I watched Brad quote Cam's doctored retention trend on a cross-functional call like it was gospel. He called it the clearest path to net revenue expansion in Q4. Meanwhile, customer success was triaging cancellations in the dark. They didn't see what I saw, because the system Cam was using had disconnected the signals. Feedback surveys weren't linked to cancellation events. Call notes weren't matched to ticket IDs. Product friction was logged into one platform, while usage telemetry was tucked in another. What had spent years weaving into one coherent narrative, they had unstitched in weeks. It was working exactly as Cam had designed it to: present confidence, bury context, sell certainty. But me, I wasn't buried. I was watching. And something inside me shifted. Sting of exile dulled. The ego wound scabbed over. Now I was cold. Not cruel, not malicious, just still, sharp, focused. This wasn't about getting my job back. That ship had sunk somewhere between the closed-door decision and the heartbeat gif on Cam's dashboard. This was about truth, because I knew what came next, not in theory, in muscle memory. Retention failure doesn't explode, it erodes, quietly. Everyone's looking at QBR decks and polishing KPI filters. But if you track the right rot, if you measure where the trust bleeds first, you can catch the moment before the collapse becomes visible. So I kept collecting. Cam posted another W in Slack. Just closed out Q3 churn at an all-time low. Fire. Big thanks to everyone who helped simplify the flow. Simplify. Yeah. I opened my logs. Marked it. Week 37. Attached Cam's churn report. My original retention forecast. A side-by-side of both with 3 accounts that had vanished like ghosts. Then I opened Notepad and wrote, "The silence isn't stability, it's suppression," and saved it next to everything else. The collapse wasn't coming. It had already begun. It started in the break room, if you could call the 4th floor micro kitchen that. I was standing by the Keurig, waiting for it to hiss out whatever passed for coffee when Darren from billing walked in, muttering under his breath and shaking his head like he'd just read a spoiler for a horror movie he was living in. "Morning," I said. He grunted, tapped the side of the pod bin and said, "You ever get the sense the data's just off? Like, not wrong, but wrong enough it's making you question your sanity?" I turned. "What kind of data?" He chuckled, rubbed his eyes, leaned against the counter like a man who'd just been ghosted by a spreadsheet. "We've been reconciling invoices for Q3 renewals. Numbers aren't lining up. We logged 5 enterprise downgrades, but the churn report says 2. You ever seen that kind of discrepancy?" I stirred my creamer in silence. "Then, did you flag it?" Darren scoffed. "I sent Cam a note. He said it was a timing artifact and that I shouldn't get caught up in the noise. Ah, there it was again. Noise. I took a long sip of my coffee, then casually asked, "Do the downgrade invoices have service adjustments logged?" His eyebrows shot up. "No." I nodded, as if that was interesting trivia, not a flaming red flag. Then I said, "Might be worth checking the contract terms." Some of those had guaranteed usage minimums. Downgrades without adjustments might trigger SLA violations. His face changed, eyes sharpening, mouth slowly closing like a man realizing he's been holding the wrong end of a lit match. "Huh," he muttered. "Good catch." I didn't reply. I just smiled and walked away, the coffee suddenly tasting a little less burnt. Darren wasn't my first breadcrumb, but he was the first to look down and notice the trail. The next one came 2 days later during a random hallway chat with Jaya from legal. She flagged me down, holding a contract packet like it was leaking battery acid. "Used to handle churn, right?" she asked. "Used to," she frowned. "Do you remember a clause in the Cipresin deal about retention benchmarks tied to their renewal fee?" I did. I'd written the internal summary notes myself. They had a 95% 3-month retention guarantee tied to implementation metrics. If we missed it, they could walk without penalty. "What about it?" I asked. "We missed it," she said, "but nobody flagged it." I tilted my head. "Anyone update the retention model with their onboarding segment?" She blinked. "I don't know. I assumed that was automatic. It used to be," I said. "But if the model was simplified, that segmentation might have been deprecated." She stared at me, eyes narrowing like she suddenly saw a crack in a windshield she hadn't noticed before. "You think that's what happened?" I shrugged. "Could be. You should ask Cam." Jaya looked down at her packet, then up at me. "This is the second client in 2 weeks who cited that clause." I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because I could see it click, the beginning of the unraveling. That afternoon, I posted a question in the #deal support channel. "Hey, does anyone know if we're still logging onboarding friction under segment C? Just noticed the tagging field's empty for some of the Q3 renewals." 2 minutes later, silence. 10 minutes later, Cam replied, "Consolidated tags to simplify the view." Segment C was noisy and didn't add value. Darren reacted with the wide eyes emoji. Jaya hearted my message. I bookmarked the thread, downloaded a copy, filed it under thread count cross-team clues. The next morning, I created a Confluence page called Retention Process Artifacts Historical and added archived PDFs of our old churn taxonomy, last touched by me 6 months ago. I quietly shared the page with 3 people, Jaya, Darren, and Jenna from Customer Success, who'd recently mentioned she couldn't find the updated churn reasons in her CRM view. No explanation, no commentary, just a link. 20 minutes later, I got a Slack ping from Jenna. "Wait, we used to track all of this." Cam said that stuff was redundant. I didn't answer directly. I just replied, "Yeah, it was messy, but it told the truth." She left a thinking face reaction. That afternoon, I uploaded one more file into thread count, a side-by-side comparison of churn reason codes, old versus new. One had nuance. The other had 5 options and a catch-all labeled other. Guess which one Cam's dashboard used exclusively? Every move I made was quiet. Nothing loud. Nothing confrontational, just precision. Like slipping a note under a door and walking away. I didn't warn anyone. Blow whistles or wave red flags. I asked questions. And let the right people walk into the answers themselves. They didn't know they were allies yet, but they would. Eventually, they'd look back and realize the path had been marked the whole way. They just hadn't noticed the breadcrumbs until the rot started to smell. And by then, the trap would already be set. The key to access wasn't begging. It was pretending not to care. Project Anchor, my exile in spreadsheet form, been ignored for weeks. No roadmap, no follow-ups, not even a passive-aggressive nudge from HR. A vacuum of purpose so wide I could hear the company's apathy echo in it, so I filled the silence. I submitted a routine internal request to Data Ops, need cohort-level churn data for internal loyalty benchmarking. Comparative insight to support employee retention modeling. Nobody questioned it. Nobody even read it, probably. Request was approved within hours. A Slack bot pinged me, access granted, expires in 7 days. Just like that, I was back in the house I'd been evicted from. Not through the front door, just a cracked window, but it was enough. I had temporary API access to core customer data, retention timelines, cancellation triggers, usage curves. I downloaded everything. Filtered by segment, by tier, by life cycle phase. Spun up a fresh local instance of the attribution model Cam had gutted. reinstated my correction formulas, ran a churn forecast for Q3 using the old logic, then ran it again using Cam's new logic. Difference? 12.3%, downward. 12% of reality shaved off like fat from a corporate pig, just to make the quarterly slide look leaner. I knew it, I'd suspected it. But now, I had it. Still, I waited. Didn't want to publish anything prematurely. Not yet. I wanted a smoking gun, not just the smell of gasoline. It arrived 2 days later, weekly growth sync. I joined with my mic muted and my camera off, just another forgotten square in a sea of disengaged rectangles. Cam was presenting this week's update, his signature presentation style heavy on emojis, light on accuracy. Then I saw it. My slide. The layout was identical. Down to the color scheme, axis labels, even the naming conventions on the customer cohorts. It was a Frankenstein version of the slide I'd crafted by hand, pixel by pixel, over 3 years of revisions. Only now the numbers were different. Padded, polished, sanitized. Cam was pointing to a bar chart labeled Retention Resilience Q3 Forecast with a neat 94.2% hovering at the top. It was bullshit. Had the real number open in another window, 81.7%, and dropping. He was narrating it like a bedtime story. We're on track to outperform last quarter thanks to simplified segmentation and a clearer customer journey lens. Translation: we deleted complexity until the data stopped screaming. Brad chimed in with a grin that made my skin crawl. Cleaner insights. Fewer false positives. Love where this is going. False positives. That's what they were calling churn warnings now, like a heart monitor beeping too early. I clicked away. I couldn't listen anymore. I opened a new doc, titled it Ignored Warnings Q3. Inside, I pasted the original forecast, Cam's altered version, data ops logs showing deleted segments, 3 client cancellations mislabeled as voluntary when they were triggered by ticket escalations with unresolved flags. Then I added a timeline, week by week, warning by warning. Each item was documented, sourced, and timestamped. Slack thread links, Salesforce ticket IDs, email receipts, even a screen recording where Cam deleted a retention field in real time, then said on Slack, "Cleaner now, less clutter lol." I exported the file as a PDF, encrypted it, sent it to my personal counsel with a subject line that said nothing and everything. FYI timestamp documentation, Q3. I didn't CC anyone. No threats, no bluff, just facts, lined up like dominoes. Then I sat back and stared at my screen, not with triumph, not even satisfaction, just grim, surgical anticipation. Because the truth wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It just needed to wait long enough for the lie to stumble. It boiled over the week before QBR. Churn passed a silent threshold, and those of us who'd lived in the trenches could smell coming long before the numbers said it out loud. But now the numbers weren't whispering. They were screaming in a language no one at the top spoke fluently. I got the first whiff from Jenna in customer success. She DM'd me late on a Tuesday. "Hey, did we change the churn alert logic? My dashboard says stable, but we lost 4 enterprise accounts in the last 10 days. I didn't answer that, just replied, "Mind sending me anonymized exit reasons?" She did, and they were damning. Unresolved support requests, 90+ days open. Lack of localization after promised Q2 implementation. No follow-up after renewal inquiry. Concerns over data governance never addressed. These weren't customers ghosting us. They were screaming into the void, and the void, apparently, was managed by Cam and branded noise. Then finance started to twitch. I saw it in the Slack channels, panic disguised as politeness. "Hi all, just wondering if anyone can confirm Q3 actuals versus forecast on recurring." Looping in strategic ops to validate if churn tags were updated post-close. Is the 3.2% net churn adjusted for post-period downgrades? And beneath each of those messages, silence, broken only by reactions. Eyes, eyes, eyes. By Thursday, I knew what was happening. Finance couldn't balance the revenue forecast. Their QBR decks had already been sent to the CEO, but the numbers were unraveling fast, and Cam's duct tape metrics couldn't cover the holes anymore. I opened the retention dashboard one last time. The churn graph showed a flat line, a peaceful C, but I already knew the truth. It wasn't a C. It was a cliff with the label peeled off. That afternoon, sales leadership called an emergency sync. I joined as a silent observer. Half the team had the strained look of people about to announce a funeral, but pretending it's just a minor hiccup in scheduling. Several top accounts have walked in the last 2 weeks, one of the regional VPs said. We weren't alerted. There was no outreach. They just left. Cam wasn't in the meeting. Neither was Brad. So the sales VP said the quiet part out loud. We've been flying blind, and we didn't even know it. And the CEO's chief of staff, Lauren, piped in. We'll need an emergency retention plan for QBR. Solutions, not blame, that phrase. Solutions, not blame, it made my skin crawl. Because if they'd listened 3 months ago, they wouldn't need solutions now. They'd have prevention. But this was the moment I'd been waiting for. Not to gloat, not to spike the football, just to act. I opened ignored warnings Q3, removed the last few pages. Too detailed, too damning. Then I created a clean one-pager, key churn triggers by segment. Exit patterns missed due to model simplification. Retention recommendations based on previous forecasts. I stripped names, scrubbed metadata, anonymized company references. Then I attached 3 anonymized client cases, just enough to sting, just enough to look like a helpful analyst trying to pitch in. Finally, I wrote the email. Subject, retention signals possible QBR input. Hi Lauren, notice some patterns that might be useful ahead of next week's prep. Flagging a few anonymized cases for context. Let me know if helpful. Best, first name, no threats. No commentary, just a lifeline, wrapped in plausible deniability. I hit send, and I printed a hard copy of the one-pager and filed it in a manila envelope labeled QBR Draft Clean and slid it into my bottom drawer at home. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't smug. I was in control. They could pretend the house wasn't on fire, but I already had the insurance papers. The room was already humming when I walked in. Too much caffeine, too little certainty. Kind of nervous corporate buzz you only hear when something's about to break, but no one wants to admit they hear the crack. Quarterly all hands, live and in person for the first time in a year. The executive team wanted to make a splash, which in practice meant catered croissants, plastic lanyards, and a PowerPoint deck polished within an inch of its life. I showed up early, took my seat in the front row with a steaming paper cup of bitter drip, settled in like I was at the theater, because I was. Cam stood near the projector setup, bouncing on the balls of his feet, one AirPod in, the other dangling like a corporate earring. He was wearing a smug smile and a blazer that looked like it came with a podcast. Brad hovered nearby, hands clasped, the human version of a slow-loading GIF. I saw him glance toward the CEO's row, then at Cam, then back, lips tight, like he knew something could go wrong. Not what or when, they didn't see me, or if they did, they didn't register me as a variable. Perfect. The CFO droned through financial highlights. Legal covered new compliance measures. Then Cam took the stage for the segment labeled Growth, Performance, and Retention Outlook. I took a long sip of coffee. Bitter. Perfect. Cam clicked to the first slide. A stylized bar chart titled Q3 Net Retention Overview. A few heads tilted. The graph showed a dramatic drop, far steeper than anything shown in previous meetings. Even with the washed-out projector, the red bars looked like a wound. He froze for a split second, then tried to recover. We've recently realigned how we categorize churn data, he began, tapping his clicker like it might change the slide by sheer will. What you're seeing is a recalibration based on new attribution methods. Recalibration. Beautiful. Murmurs rose from the audience like steam off a manhole. Cam cleared his throat. Our retention resilience remains strong, but legacy metrics introduced noise. This new clarity lets us focus on strategic friction points. He was rambling. Fast, then came the click. Slide 2, quarterly comparison. Why churn delta? This one didn't hide behind design. It was a raw line graph, Q2 to Q3. The line didn't dip, it plummeted, from 6.1% churn to 18.4%. Gasps. Audible. CEO, seated directly behind me, leaned forward. His chair creaked. Cam's voice cracked as he stumbled through a bullet point. The spike is temporary, likely tied to onboarding transitions and some lingering implementation lag. The CEO shifted again, this time turning to Brad, eyes narrowed. Brad's smile had vanished. I watched him flick his gaze to Cam, then to the screen, then to his notes, as if trying to find some version of reality where this was still under control. There was none. Another click. Slide 3, top churn reasons. Q3. The list was damning. No post-renewal follow-up. Support non-responsiveness. Broken feature commitment. Onboarding gap unresolved. The room had gone dead quiet. The head of sales shifted in his seat. Customer success exchanged side eyes, and the CEO, he wasn't angry. Not yet, just confused. Deeply, quietly confused in the way only a man betrayed by false certainty could be. He raised one hand, palm flat, cutting Cam off mid-sentence. "Where was this in the last forecast?" he asked. No one answered. Cam looked to Brad like a dog begging for the door to open. Brad swallowed. "We simplified some reporting layers, cleaned up segmentation." The CEO stared at the screen again. 18%. Cam tried to recover. "We believe it's a temporary anomaly." "How long have you known this?" the CEO asked. Silence. I watched it all from my seat, sipping coffee, legs crossed, face unreadable. Not triumphant, not smug, just balanced, because this wasn't revenge, it was gravity. The inevitable drop when truth is buried long enough under lies and PowerPoint decks. Cam clicked again. Nothing changed. The next slide failed to load. His hand trembled on the clicker. Somewhere behind me, someone whispered, "Jesus Christ." And in that moment, watching a man drown in his own simplifications, I felt no pity. Only justice. Slow, surgical, quiet. I leaned back and took another sip. Warm, bitter, perfect. The meeting ended without applause, without the usual hollow cheers or Slack emoji chains. No great quarter, team. No awkward VP high fives or recycled jokes about coffee budgets. Just a room full of adults staring at each other like the Titanic had hit something, and no one could decide who forgot the binoculars. The CEO stood up slowly, gaze locked on the frozen slide still glowing behind Cam. Q3 net retention actuals. He didn't yell, didn't pace. Just looked at his leadership team with the kind of exhausted disbelief that makes grown men wish for an earthquake. And then he asked, quietly, "Why wasn't I told?" No one moved. Brad swallowed. Cam stared at the floor. One of the sales VPs reached for a water bottle that was already empty. You could have heard a mouse blink. The CEO's face didn't change. He just nodded once slowly, as if confirming the exact moment the ground shifted beneath him. Then he left. No dramatic exit, just a door clicking shut behind him. The silence that followed was colder than any scream. By the next morning, legal had teeth. I knew it before I even got the email. You can feel when protocol has turned to bloodlust. The kind of quiet frenzy that follows a C-suite betrayal. Slack channels slowed. Calendar invites multiplied. People started using full sentences again in emails. The fake friendliness vanished, and then it happened. A ping from legal. Subject, request, data access and retention logs Q2/Q3, audit no accusation. No alarm, just a formal glove slap from the internal sheriffs. They were pulling everything, Salesforce logs, data exports, dashboard change histories. Not hunting for me specifically, just trying to find the leak, the root, the who knew what and when. But they found me anyway, because I'd made sure they would. The clean breadcrumbs I'd left weren't just for whistleblowing, they were for time-stamped clarity. Logged, labeled, archived, no anonymous tips, no backdoor drama. Just truth. Truth, when built right, can't be spun. It wasn't long before I got another email. This one short, personal, not from legal. From Lauren, Chief of Staff, subject, "Can we talk?" No CC, no passive-aggressive urgency markers, just a quiet white flag. I met her in a private Zoom room. Her background was blurred. Mine wasn't. "Thanks for making time," she said. "I just sipped my tea and waited." She looked tired. She'd spent the last 24 hours realizing how much of the company's strategic roadmap was built on sand. Behind her, the echo of silence. Then, "We've traced some of the churn forecasts, particularly the pre-Q3 signals, back to you." I nodded once. "That tracks." "You didn't escalate them." I raised an eyebrow. "I submitted 3 requests through the ops channel. Asked about missing onboarding segments. Pinged finance with cohort gaps. Shared documentation on deprecated taxonomy fields. I didn't escalate because I wasn't allowed near the top anymore." She sighed. "Brad and Cam made a closed-door decision," I said. I respected it. She didn't argue. "After a beat, your report. Ignored warnings Q3, it's thorough, thank you." Then came the pitch. "We'd like to talk about reinstating you, not back where you were, something broader, more direct access. Cleaner scope." I let the pause stretch just long enough for her to feel it. Then, "No," she blinked. "No," I smiled, not cruelly. "Just clean, not unless I set the terms." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What are your terms?" I leaned forward. "I report directly to the CEO. No Brad, no Cam, I want full system access reinstated. Platform privileges. Freedom to build or dismantle whatever I see fit. My old retention models restored with audit visibility. If I say someone's lying with numbers, it gets listened to." Lauren typed notes as I spoke. Oh, I added an equity, retroactive, Q2 vesting. She stopped typing. That's a big ask, I shrugged. So is trusting a ghost to rebuild your retention engine? She nodded once slowly. I'll take it to him. I stood, straightened my blazer, one I hadn't worn since they exiled me to PowerPoint purgatory, and said, You've seen what happens when you let liars run the numbers. I left the call. No dramatic music, no mic drop, just quiet power reclaimed, and this time they had to ask to use it. The conference room was colder than usual, or maybe that was just the silence. No assistants, no snacks, no performative smiles. Just me, the CEO, and a single folder on the table between us, unlabeled, but heavy in the way truth always is. Inside it, the full paper trail. Every breadcrumb I'd dropped. Every ignored Slack thread. Misrepresented metric, overwritten model, and fake forecast. Cross-referenced, time-stamped, and bound with the kind of precision you only get from someone who's not trying to win, just trying to be undeniable. I didn't speak at first. I let him open it. Let him scan the first few pages. Let him read the printout of Cam's retention success Slack post beside the actual customer cancellation logs for that same week. His face didn't twitch. No anger, no shame, just a slow, dawning resignation, like a man realizing the car crash he's in started 3 turns ago and no one was ever really driving. I walked him through it, not to explain but to record, like a court stenographer for the sins of corporate apathy. This, I said, pointing to one chart, was your first silent red flag. You missed it because Cam collapsed segmentation. Everyone looked cleaner, but the risk pooled underneath. Flip. This was where sales started burning goodwill. Renewals were being pushed through with no follow-up. They thought they were hitting numbers. They were lighting matches. Flip. Right here, legal should have caught it. That was the contract that had the churn clause no one enforced. You could have avoided the penalty with one dashboard alert. Flip. And here, I tapped the final page, a printout of the retention model Cam had cannibalized. This was the moment you let someone who didn't know the system kill the only thing keeping your bottom line from hemorrhaging. Silence. He leaned back, looked up at the ceiling for a moment, then down again. I want to offer you your old role back, he said, but with a broader scope. Report directly to me. Clean title. Full equity vesting, including retro. We'll rebuild the system around your model. No interference. I smiled, not bitter, not smug, just tired of being underestimated. Then I stood, smoothed my blazer, picked up my copy of the folder, and said, It's a closed-door decision. You'll hear from my lawyer. He didn't argue, just nodded. As I walked out, the hallway lights flickered slightly, or maybe that was just the adrenaline wearing off. Brad's office was empty, so was Cam's. The silence wasn't awkward. It was cleansing. At the elevator, I pulled out my phone to call a car. Right as I stepped inside, a ping. Board comms thread urgent reviewing internal audit report. Retention model timeline verified. Attribution chain confirmed. Flag, Bradley M., negligence pending review. I smiled, no reaction, just acknowledgement, not revenge, not victory. Leverage and the best kind, earned, documented, irreversible. I stepped into the sunlit parking lot, not unemployed, not demoted, not begging. I was negotiating. My next role. My own terms, with every hand now forced, and every eye finally open. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button, or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.